I've got a list of questions here, and if you have anecdotes or stories that you want to share along with your answers, that would be fantastic. So what do you feel your role is as a science communicator? What responsibilities do you have to the public, and what responsibilities do you have to academic and industrial contacts?
Well, I never really started out to be a science communicator. In fact, when I was training to be a scientist, I remember I did exactly one presentation to my group, to the scientists, in all of my undergraduate training. In my graduate work, the only time I ever did a presentation was once to a department meeting. So I think in general, when you're training scientists, you don't really train them really well to be a scientific communicator, at least when it comes to public speaking. I wrote papers, which is one form of communication, but almost nobody reads those. So you don't get a ton of feedback. Really, I started doing science communications because I have a perspective that's considerably different than most of my colleagues. And so the only way to get those ideas out into the world is to start to share them. So I did my first presentation, I remember, to a group of friends in San Francisco in my home. I invited everyone over, have some pizza, have some beer, and I'm going to tell you about DNA. And then it just started snowballing. I started doing more and more talks as the perspectives got refined. And today, I've spent really the last 5 years traveling around the world, sharing and communicating largely to lay audiences. So people that aren't scientists for the most part. And really, what I've learned is all you have to do is be able to tell a story about science in a way that's understandable to everyone. So it makes it more engaging, it makes it more fun, and you start to be able to really change people's hearts and minds regardless of the professions that they happen to be in.
Cool. So you have a master's degree, right?
I do.
And so do you find any challenges having a master's rather than a PhD with regards to how people receive your presentations and how people view you as an authority on the subject?
That's a great question, and yes, in general, I'd say that's true. So the reason why I stopped at a master's degree, and I shared this in my presentation yesterday, is I had a very rare opportunity to jump from a PhD program to the very top of biotech, to the biggest company doing the most amazing things. And if I was to finish my degree, which would have taken another 3 or 4 years, I would have missed most of the dynamics that were going on around sequencing the human genome. I knew it was going to be done by about the year 2000. I just decided to opt out and leave. So I got to really, I got an on-the-job PhD, basically. Now, it's funny, science is, if you don't have a PhD, you're not able to apply for grants as a lead. Very few people, most other scientists immediately discount you. I never worried about it, in part because I jumped to industry, and although I didn't have the degree, I made about 3 or 4 times more than most of my scientific colleagues. I mean, at the PhD level in senior professorship. So I've never really felt in any way slighted by the fact that I didn't have a degree. And then since I've actually started sharing my ideas, I've met Nobel Prize winners, I've met the head of most institutes, I've met billionaires, I've met performers and actors, and I've had so many experiences that I would not have gotten if I had stayed in a PhD in a conventional program. And now I think my title is Autodesk Distinguished Researcher. No one asks if I have a doctorate or not. It doesn't matter. But I tell students going into science, while you're young, while you're focused, do a PhD. Like, just focus, if it makes sense. And as you're doing your PhD, if you get this incredible opportunity to jump away, jump away. Go build a company, go join that group, go travel the world, whatever, because you can always come back and pick up where you left off. Universities aren't going to disappear. So, but really, if you want to do a career in science, you need a doctorate.
So you were talking about science communication and its impact, right? I mean, more and more people are willing to appreciate what's happening in universities and translate it and understand how that's relevant to their lives. So, but what do you think is the state of science communication today? You think are journalists with no scientific background still doing a good job in picking up the slack left by scientists?
Yeah, in general, granted, people seek a lot of different forms of information these days. But I've always been fairly impressed at how well journalists can digest a lot of technical information, distill out the essence of it, and put it into a story for their readership. And there are a lot of publications out there. Whether you're talking Wired magazine, more looking to the future, or Popular Science, really showcasing a lot of the products to, Discover, et cetera, et cetera. There are many different types of magazines and newspapers, et cetera, where you can get really good scientific information about the bigger breakthroughs on the front end, and more thoughtful pieces on fields, industries, et cetera. So, in fact, the publications, the communications that I have the most difficulty with right now are the big scientific journals that are proprietary, Cell Science, Nature. They're not accessible to the public, except for an abstract or a little teaser. $30 to download an issue. $30 for for PDF, like, come on. It's so restrictive that I don't support those channels of communication anymore, and I don't subscribe. For the most part, if there is an article that comes through that is high enough impact to be interesting to the public, it gets picked up in the media, and I'll see it through electronic channels, and I can always get. I do have access to electronic journals. It's just I don't find most times I need them, because the stuff that's really relevant to people in their everyday lives will get picked up by other media channels. So I'm almost at the point, why bother using these other channels? It's really, it's necessary mainly so the academics have their publication track record, which is so important for their funding. And certainly they are high impact journals. They are peer reviewed. I'm not dissing their business model. I just think that once all is said and done, there should be avenues to disseminate this information, the technical information, a little more easily. Of course, we've seen open access journals like Public Library of Science, fantastic, but that was a disruptor in this area.